Hello everybody, welcome to my channel, TheAirsoftTech. I am obviously TheAirsoftTech. As many of you know, I am sponsored by Brill Armory, a fantastic place to buy parts for all your airsoft upgrade needs. And as a part of our sponsorship deal, Brill Armory sends me parts to review. A while back, I received a plethora of parts. Several of them you have seen reviews for already. The SEMA piston and the PPS STS, which is the shock transfer system. And some that you haven't seen reviews for yet. The Lonex Version2 Gearbox shell, Miyake's motor alignment checker tool, and a Siegetek 9-tooth DSG. So yes, I'm going to get on with it. Today we will be checking out the Lonex Version2 Gearbox shell and the Siegetek 9-tooth DSG. The Lonex Version2 Gearbox is pretty much the go-to upgrade gearbox shell. Ever since it's been around, it has been the go-to shell primarily because it's always been a great, reliable, strong part, sitting right at the reasonable price point of $46 on Brill Armory. The Siegetek 9-tooth DSG hasn't been around for as long as the Lonex Gearbox shell, but it's easily more prestigious. A DSG is meant to be used with a strong spring, M150 and up. This is because DSG cycle at about half the stroke of a regular sector gear. The 8-tooth DSG cycles at 50% the stroke, and the 9-tooth DSG cycles at about 56% the stroke. The 8-tooth DSG costs around $55 and the 9-tooth DSG costs around $60. Now, as to what you should get, that depends on your build and your goals. But today, we will be looking at the 9-tooth DSG specifically. I've taken these two parts, the Lonex Version2 Gearbox shell and the Siegetek 9-tooth DSG, and have installed them into my M4. So, let's go over the tech table and check these parts out and the entire build. Taking a very simple glance at this build without even taking anything apart, you can tell that it does have a Lonex Gearbox shell in it. Lonex Gearbox shells have that classic silver shiny look to them that is just really awesome to have in a gun in my opinion, especially when you combine it with the nice and shiny Lonex Version2 hop-up unit combined with the nice and shiny Lonex Version2 Gearbox shell. It just looks nice and sleek. Alright, so before we delve into this gearbox and open it up and take a look at everything inside and analyze the Lonex and 9-tooth DSG, I will tell you that quite a few things have changed since you've last seen the inside of this gearbox, such as I have a BTC Spectrum MOSFET in it right now, I have a green trigger installed in it right now by Retro Arms, it's the Type B. I also replaced the piston, replaced the spring, and I believe that's about it. So let's open this thing up and analyze it. So here is the build. Here's the Lonex Gearbox shell, and here's the Siegetek Sector Gear, the DSG, the 9-tooth one. So what I've changed, like I said, was the piston. I swapped it from a SEMA piston. Now I made that SEMA piston video and it failed in this build. It didn't break, it just wore down to where it wouldn't pick up. And that was really strange. So I took the piston, threw it into another build, an SSG in my AK, and it functions flawlessly now. No clue what's going on there. All I know is it will not work in this setup. So, not sure. Kind of strange. I'll have to look into it a bit more. Next thing I replaced was the trigger unit. I did get a BTC Spectrum MOSFET here for it. I got my other one repaired, so now I have this one here. The MOSFET unit I had in it earlier was just a basic 3034 MOSFET. I like these SpectraFETs much more. They're just so much more easy to work with and very reliable. So that's always awesome. And I replaced the trigger I had in it. The trigger originally was some sort of just standard trigger, so I replaced it with a Retro Arms straight trigger, the Type B green one. Alright, so let's first start off with the shell. The Lonex Version2 shell is an awesome shell if you ask me. It's made out of an alloy of zinc and aluminum, which gives it a really tough structure. It is cast, it is not CNC'd for people that do not know that. It comes with standard Allen key screws all the way around and little washers for them. In addition, it comes with bearings. I've replaced those with bushings. Lonex bearings are okay, they'll work on a lot of builds, but at the same time, if you're pushing a stress build like over 30 RPS or any DSG, I definitely wouldn't run them just because they're bearings and they're just weak bearings, honestly, for stress builds. Like I said, they're alright for basic builds, but I would not push them hard at all. This Lonex Gearbox shell comes with 8mm bearing bushing slots, which is great. 9mm, there's not a whole lot on the market for 9mm except decent bushings, or well, good bushings. I don't know very many good bearings for 9mm. 7mm is too low for any good bearings, so 8mm is right in the sweet spot if you ask me. You can get modified ceramic, magic box bearings, and you can get these awesome Lonex or VFC flush bushings, which are just fantastic. Everything else in the gearbox shell is very well on spec. The only criticism I have with this shell is that these pegs here for the wires are just way too long, and I always have to shave them down for whatever I use. It's just stupid. I wish they'd just get rid of them. The next small complaint I have is the old Lonex shells used to have a slot right here, like the standard Version2 Gearbox shell. So this isn't here, and what this causes is when you have to install this in, say, a gun that the receiver is split in, say like a KWA, then you have to mill this part out right here. And that's a huge pain, so I really don't want to do that. I really wish they'd bring back that old design, because it just worked and it was more compatible and it had no issue to begin with. So I did like that little slot back here, like I said, but it's not too big. It's not too big of a problem because it can be fixed with. Like you can make that hole there, but that's just a big waste of time if you ask me. Just a real quick something to notice here. The only thing I do to Lonex gearbox shells, besides shave those pegs down right there for more wire space, is radius them. Of course, radius your gearbox shells. It makes them just 10 times stronger. That probably isn't true, the figure 10 times, but it does make it a lot stronger. So definitely please radius your gearbox shells. I do have a guide on that, so go watch it. Alright, so the next thing we'll go over is the 9-tooth DSG by Siegetek. This gear is simply just awesome. It'll work with many other gear sets. It'll work with any 18:1 TM spec ratio gear sets, and it'll work with any of the Siegetek gears, besides their high torque ones, which are like above 20:1. So this DSG has 9 teeth on each side of itself. That's why it's called a dual sector gear. It has 2 sets or 2 sectors of teeth. Both are 9. So it also has these 2 cutoff cams, or not cutoff cams, the tappet cams here to pull back for feeding. 2 of them for double feeding, obviously. On the back side, it has a double cutoff cam, which enables semi-fire wherever the positioning of the DSG is. Now this DSG, this gear itself, is made out of chromoly steel, which is just incredibly strong. And so this is, imagine how like your standard gear sets, they're like decent steel, they're not made poorly, but they do break sometimes. Siegetek gears would be very, very hard pressed to break, basically because they are made with such a strong metal. And so I've never broken one myself. I've never broken any of the bevels, the spurs, the sectors, nothing. I've seen people break them, but that's because they were using a very hard pinion gear, or their shimming was so atrocious that they just had to break. So basically these gears aren't invincible, but basically they are if you know how to shim. As far as product limitations for Lonex gearbox shell and Siegetek 9-tooth DSG, I would say there's almost nothing you can throw at either of these parts to get them to break. Now, if your shimming and your tuning is all optimal, neither of these parts, the Lonex Version2 Gearbox shell or the Siegetek DSG, should break on an MS210 or an M190 spring. Guaranteed, both of these are very, very brutal springs. Even if you run an 8-tooth DSG set up on either of these springs, it's gonna be a lot of stress on that gearbox shell. But I have never seen one Lonex Version2 Gearbox shell crack when it was properly tuned. Granted, it can happen. I'm not saying it can't happen. It most certainly can happen. And maybe the MS210 DSG 9-tooth setup can make that happen, but I personally have not seen it. Other parts tend to fail way before the gearbox shell does, especially a Lonex gearbox shell. Same thing applies to the 9-tooth DSG by Siegetek. It is just incredibly tough. There is not a spring on the market that can hold a candle to it. So, optimal conditions, neither of these parts should break. They're both very top of the line parts. Like I said, I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's very unlikely that either of these parts will break under optimal tuning conditions when paired with very tough setups. There's one thing you should be aware of when using a 9-tooth DSG as opposed to an 8-tooth DSG, is that 9-tooth DSGs can hit premature engagement much more easily than the simple 8-tooth DSG. So you gotta make sure you're using proper springs, proper motor setups, proper battery setups, so you don't hit premature engagement. Say for example, if you were to use a 16 TPA motor, an 8-tooth DSG, an M150 spring and 11.1 volt, you probably won't hit PME. But if you do this with a 9-tooth setup, it's possible that you can. So be sure that you know what you're doing when you work with a 9-tooth DSG. Do more research on these things, or simply have more experience and understand how the system works. But research is a bit more simple than having years of experience. Well, fellow techs, I hope you've enjoyed this video. This has been a video review and kind of update on my DSG build for the Lonex Version2 Gearbox shelf and the Siegetek 9-tooth DSG sector gear. And as always, of course, you guys know the drill. Tell me what you thought of this video down below. And of course, go check out my Facebook page, Instagram, and Patreon if you do not mind. Go do that. And of course, go check out Brill Armory. I know a lot of you techs out there order a lot of your parts from Brill Armory, if not most of them, or all of them even. I order probably 80% of my teching parts from Brill Armory. It's a fantastic website, very quick shipping, and very competitive prices. So anyway, that'll be the end of this video. I will see you techs later, and remember techs, stay tuned.